My name is Ambassador Klix-Vorthak, and I've spent the last 3 cycles watching the so-called advanced civilizations of our galaxy fail spectacularly at basic medicine. You'd think after 10,000 years of interstellar cooperation, we'd have figured out how to handle a microscopic organism. You'd be wrong. The Zurian plague hit us like a cosmic joke with terrible timing. It started in the Centauri colonies, spread to 14 star systems within 2 months, and our best medical minds responded with all the effectiveness of a chocolate teapot. Mortality rate, 89%. Treatment success? Let's just say our medical schools might want to update their curriculums. I'd been broadcasting distress calls across known space for weeks, getting the usual bureaucratic responses. The Altarian Medical Institute wanted to form a committee to study the feasibility of forming a committee. The Vegan Health Consortium offered thoughts and prayers which, surprisingly, proved as medically useful as expected. The Rigelian Empire suggested we try turning our entire population off and on again. So when I sent a desperate transmission to Earth, a planet most of our coalition considered a backwater medical curiosity, I wasn't expecting much. Humans had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago, and their reputation was, shall we say, complicated. They were known for 3 things: coffee that could dissolve hull plating, an inexplicable obsession with explosions, and medical practices that seemed equal parts brilliant and terrifying. The response came back in 4 hours. 4 hours. Not 4 days, not 4 weeks, not 4 months of committee meetings. 4 hours. The message was brief: received your distress call. Medical assistance approved. Convoy departing in 72 hours. Estimate arrival in 6 days. Please prepare patient manifests and facility access codes. And clear orbital approach lanes. We travel with escort. Signed, Dr. Miranda Hayes, Terran Medical Response Division. I stared at that message for a solid 10 minutes. They weren't asking for payment. They weren't demanding territorial concessions. They weren't even asking for a formal treaty. They just said they'd help and asked us to get the paperwork ready. The most unsettling part? They mentioned an escort. Military escort for a medical mission seemed oddly paranoid, even for humans. But at that point, with plague victims dying faster than we could count them, I would have accepted medical aid delivered by singing purple elephants if it meant saving lives. Little did I know that the humans were about to demonstrate that when they say they're going to help with a medical crisis, but they mean it in ways that would redefine my understanding of both medicine and the appropriate application of overwhelming firepower to healthcare logistics. When the human convoy dropped out of hyperspace, I expected to see a small medical frigate, maybe a converted cargo hauler with some surgical equipment bolted to the hull. What I got was 3 hospital ships, each the size of a small space station, accompanied by what my scanner cheerfully identified as the U.S. Hippocratic Oath, a dreadnought-class battleship that looked like it could crack moons. Dr. Miranda Hayes contacted me directly from the lead hospital ship. She was a middle-aged woman with the kind of calm demeanor you'd expect from someone discussing the weather, not a galactic plague crisis. Her first words were, "Ambassador Vorthak, we're ready to begin immediate patient intake. We've brought comprehensive medical facilities and full surgical capabilities. Where would you like us to start?" I managed to stammer out something about the escort being rather, heavily armed for a medical mission. "Oh, the Hippocratic Oath?" Dr. Hayes glanced off screen, presumably at the massive warship. Standard escort protocol for medical missions. Captain Rodriguez runs a tight ship. Don't worry, she won't interfere with medical operations unless someone tries to interfere with medical operations. Then she gets grumpy. Standard protocol. They considered a dreadnought-class battleship standard protocol for delivering medical aid. I was beginning to understand why the galactic community found humans simultaneously fascinating and terrifying. The medical team that beamed aboard my station defied every expectation I had about healthcare professionals. Dr. Hayes looked like she could perform brain surgery during an earthquake and complain about the lighting. Her chief medical officer was a mountain of a man named Bjorn Ironside. whose idea of bedside manner apparently involved intimidating diseases into submission through pure physical presence. "All right, Ambassador," Bjorn announced, reviewing a tablet that somehow already contained complete medical profiles of every plague victim in the system. "We've run preliminary analysis on your pathogen. Good news, it's not the worst thing we've seen this month. Bad news for the plague, we've dealt with 17 similar organisms in the past century, so this is going to be embarrassingly easy." I watched them set up their equipment with the efficiency of a military operation. Within 2 hours, they had established full medical facilities on 3 space stations, deployed emergency treatment centers on 4 planets, and somehow convinced my panicking medical staff that everything was going to be fine. The most disturbing part wasn't their efficiency. It was their attitude. They treated a plague that had stumped our greatest minds like a minor inconvenience. Doctor. Hayes actually took a coffee break while reviewing our failed treatment protocols, occasionally making notes like "tried this in 2387, but didn't work then either," and "oh, classic mistake, you never use Rigelian antifungals on a viral pathogen." Chief Ironside was examining plague samples under a microscope when he chuckled. Actually chuckled. "At a deadly pathogen, Miranda." He called out, "Remember the Martian flu of '94? This little guy's practically identical, just with different surface proteins. Should we use the Singapore protocol or go straight to the enhanced Berlin treatment?" "Singapore first," Dr. Hayes replied without looking up from her surgical prep. "If these folks' immune systems are as delicate as their medical records suggest, we don't want to overwhelm them with the full Berlin approach right off the bat." I realized with growing horror that humans had not only seen diseases like this before, they had specific named protocols for treating them. They had so much experience with deadly plagues that they had to choose between multiple proven treatment methods. What kind of species develops multiple standardized protocols for surviving apocalyptic diseases? The transformation was immediate and frankly unsettling. Within 6 hours of beginning treatment, human medical teams had reduced the mortality rate from 89% to 47%. By the end of the first day, it was down to 12%. Our medical staff, who had been preparing for mass casualties, suddenly found themselves dealing with a manageable patient load. Dr. Hayes explained their approach during what she called a routine medical briefing, which felt more like listening to someone describe how to make breakfast. "We're using a modified version of protocols developed during the Terran pandemic wars of 2387 to 2391. Similar pathogen structure, responds well to targeted immune system enhancement combined with aggressive symptom management. We've made some adjustments for non-human physiology. But the basic approach is sound." Pandemic wars. They had wars against diseases. Plural. "The key, Doctor," Hayes continued, "is understanding that pathogens like this are essentially biological weapons that got out of hand. Earth dealt with 12 engineered plagues during the corporate conflicts, so we developed standardized response protocols. This particular organism shares about 78% genetic similarity with the Shanghai strain from 2389. Frankly, it's almost refreshingly straightforward." Chief Medical Officer Ironside was demonstrating their treatment approach to my medical staff, and his teaching method involved what I can only describe as aggressively competent healthcare delivery. He'd approach critically ill patients with the enthusiasm of someone about to fix a particularly interesting mechanical problem. "Right. He'd announce to a room full of dying plague victims, "Let's get you folks sorted out. Ambassador, your people's immune systems are working too hard on the wrong targets. We're going to redirect them, boost the effective responses, and suppress the inflammatory reactions that are doing most of the actual damage. Should have you up and about in 48 hours. And then he'd proceed to do exactly that, while cracking jokes about patient recovery rates and making casual observations about the quality of local medical equipment. His bedside manner was simultaneously terrifying and reassuring. Patients seemed to recover faster just to escape his well-intentioned intimidation. The real revelation came when I met nurse practitioner Tommy Morrison, who everyone called Tank. He'd been assigned to the Emergency Treatment Center on Zarian Prime, the hardest-hit colony world. His approach to medical care could best be described as battlefield healthcare with a smile. See, the thing about plague response. Tank explained while somehow performing surgery and maintaining casual conversation, is that you've got to treat it like combat medicine. Fast, efficient. Overwhelming force applied at exactly the right points. We learned this during the Luna City crisis of 2394. Lost too many people being gentle and careful. Sometimes you've got to hit a disease harder than it's hitting your patient. I watched him save 17 lives in 2 hours while maintaining the same cheerful demeanor someone might use while gardening. The human medical team wasn't just treating the plague, they were systematically dismantling it with the efficiency of an industrial operation. The most unnerving part was their confusion at our amazement. When I expressed gratitude for their miraculous intervention, Dr. Hayes looked genuinely puzzled. Miraculous. Ambassador, this is basic medical response. We brought standard equipment and applied established protocols. The only unusual thing about this mission is how cooperative the pathogen has been. Usually we have to deal with at least some antibiotic resistance or adaptive mutations. They considered saving nearly 1 million lives to be a routine Tuesday. I was beginning to understand that humans didn't just practice medicine, they had weaponized healthcare and turned it into a precision instrument of biological problem-solving. Just when I thought the crisis was manageable, the universe decided to remind me that nothing involving humans is ever simple. Captain Razak Bloodclaw of the Crimson Death pirate fleet chose that exact moment to arrive with 12 heavily armed ships, and what he undoubtedly considered a brilliant plan. Pirates, in case you've never had the pleasure, are essentially space-faring opportunists with delusions of tactical competence. They specialize in showing up when civilized people are dealing with actual problems and making everything worse while stealing anything valuable. Razak's opening transmission was a masterpiece of criminal theatrics. Attention medical vessels, prepare to surrender your supplies and equipment. These colonies are under pirate jurisdiction now. Resistance will result in the destruction of your pathetic hospital ships. I immediately began emergency evacuation protocols, expecting the human medical mission to withdraw to a safe distance until the military situation could be resolved. This seemed like basic common sense. When pirates show up with overwhelming firepower, medical personnel evacuate. That's how civilized species handle these situations. Captain Elena Rodriguez of the U.S. Hippocratic Oath had different ideas. Her response to Razak's demands was delivered in the same tone Dr. Hayes used for medical briefings, calm, professional, and utterly matter-of-fact. Pirate vessels, this is Captain Rodriguez of the Terran Medical Response Division. We are conducting humanitarian operations under Galactic medical emergency protocols. Please form an orderly line for vaccination or remove yourselves from our operational space. An orderly line for vaccination. She offered pirates medical treatment. Razak seemed as confused as I was. Did you just offer us medical care? We're here to rob you, not get checkups. Understood. Rodriguez replied with the patience of someone explaining basic concepts to a slow child. However, Bendui, our medical scans indicate several of your crew members are showing early symptoms of Zarian plague infection. Dr. Hayes has asked me to inform you that treatment is most effective when administered within the first 72 hours of exposure. Would you like to discuss medical assistance? Or shall we continue with the robbery? Either way, medical operations will continue uninterrupted. I stared at the tactical display in growing horror. The humans had brought a Dreadnought-class battleship to a medical mission not because they expected trouble, but because they refused to let anything interfere with their healthcare delivery. They were going to continue treating plague victims even if it meant fighting a pirate fleet simultaneously. This wasn't military escort doctrine. This was something far more terrifying. Humans who considered medical care a moral imperative that superseded minor inconveniences like armed robbery and potential ship-to-ship combat. "Your medical operations end now," Razak snarled, apparently deciding that threats would work better than confused questions. "Surrender your supplies, or we'll blast your hospital ships into scrap metal." Captain Rodriguez's response was delivered with the same calm professionalism: negative. "Medical operations are protected under Terran Emergency Response Protocol 7. Any interference with humanitarian missions will be met with appropriate defensive measures." Dr. Hayes, "Please continue with scheduled surgeries. This shouldn't take long." The pirates had made the classic mistake of assuming that medical personnel would be helpless in combat situations. They were about to learn that humans had solved the problem of protecting healthcare workers by making their medical missions essentially mobile fortresses with excellent bedside manner. What happened next redefined my understanding of the phrase appropriate defensive measures. The Hippocratic Oath didn't open fire with the overwhelming destructive capability I'd expected from a dreadnought-class warship. Instead, Captain Rodriguez demonstrated surgical precision that would have made Dr. Hayes proud. The first pirate ship that moved to attack position found its weapons systems disabled by what the tactical officer described as target electromagnetic pulse deployment. The second ship lost engine power to selective ion beam application. The third ship discovered that its communication array had been temporarily reconfigured to broadcast medical emergency protocols on all frequencies. "Dr. Hayes," Captain Rodriguez announced over the ship's communication system, "I'm showing minimal interference with medical operations. Surgical Bay 3 might experience minor vibrations during defensive maneuvers, but nothing that should impact your work." "Acknowledged, Captain," Dr. Hayes replied from what I could only assume was an operating theater. "Could you try to keep the excitement to a minimum? I'm performing microsurgery on a Centauri nervous system, and they're notoriously sensitive to disruption." "Understood. Reducing defensive measures to precision targeting only." I watched in fascination as the Hippocratic Oath systematically disabled the entire pirate fleet without destroying a single ship. Every shot was calculated to neutralize threats while preserving lives. It was like watching a surgeon perform an operation on 12 patients simultaneously, each requiring different procedures but all intended to ensure survival. Chief Medical Officer Ironside apparently decided that the battle qualified as a medical emergency and began coordinating treatment for wounded pirates even as the fighting continued. "Tank. It?" he called out. "We're getting casualty reports from the disabled ships. Looks like some minor injuries from emergency landings and system failures. Want to prep emergency treatment Bay 4. "Already on it, Chief," Tank replied cheerfully. "Should I set up for standard combat injuries or spacesuit malfunctions?" "Bit of both, probably. Pirates aren't known for maintaining their safety equipment properly." The surreal nature of the situation reached its peak when Dr. Hayes announced over general communications, "Attention pirate vessels, this is Dr. Miranda Hayes, Chief Medical Officer of the Terran Medical Response Division. Our scans indicate several of your crew members require immediate medical attention. We have treatment facilities available and will provide care regardless of your current legal status. Please respond if you require emergency medical assistance." "Nea." Captain Razak himself responded, and his voice carried a note of confusion that bordered on existential crisis. "You're offering to treat our wounded? We just tried to rob you." "Yes, we're aware," Dr. Hayes replied with the same patience she'd shown when explaining plague treatment protocols. "However, medical care is not contingent on prior behavior. We have injured people who need treatment. Would you like us to beam medical teams to your ships, or would you prefer to transport patients to our facilities?" The pirate captain's response was a long silence, followed by what sounded like him having a heated discussion with his crew. "Finally, you're serious about this? Medical treatment for pirates?" "Captain Bloodclaw," Dr. Hayes said, and I could hear the slight smile in her voice, "we're human. We take healthcare seriously. Besides, you've been exposed to Xerian plague, and leaving that untreated would be medically irresponsible. Within 2 hours, the entire pirate fleet had been converted into an impromptu medical assistance operation. Captain Rodriguez had disabled their weapons systems with such precision that the ships could still maneuver and provide support, but couldn't threaten anyone. Dr. Hayes had organized treatment protocols that had the pirates helping distribute medical supplies to plague victims. The crowning moment came when Captain Razak Bloodclaw himself ended up in the human medical bay, receiving treatment for both plague exposure and what Tank cheerfully diagnosed as chronic stress-related hypertension, probably caused by career-related lifestyle choices. "You know," Razak said to Dr. Hayes while being treated for his various conditions, "in 30 years of piracy, no one ever offered me health care before." "That's unfortunate," Dr. Hayes replied while adjusting his treatment regimen. "Preventive care is much more cost-effective than emergency interventions. Have you considered a career change? We could always use medical logistics coordinators for supply distribution." And that's how humanity accidentally recruited a pirate fleet, by being aggressively helpful. 3 weeks after the humans arrived, the Zirion plague had been completely eradicated from all affected systems. Not contained, not managed, eradicated, but the mortality rate had dropped to 0.3%, and those were cases involving patients who had delayed treatment until their conditions were nearly terminal. Captain Razak Bloodclaw, now going by Medical Logistics Coordinator Razak, was overseeing the distribution of medical supplies with the enthusiasm of someone who'd discovered a career that actually made sense. His former pirate crew had become surprisingly effective at medical transport operations, possibly because their previous experience with high-speed maneuvering and cargo handling translated well to emergency medical logistics. "You know what I don't understand about piracy?" Razak mentioned to me during one of our supply coordination meetings. "It's incredibly inefficient. All that risk and violence for minimal profit margins. Medical logistics, though, steady work, decent benefits, and you actually help people." Dr. Hayes even set up a retirement plan. Dr. Hayes presented her final mission report with the same casual professionalism she'd maintained throughout the crisis. Final statistics: 847,000 lives saved across 14 star systems. 0 human casualties. Medical infrastructure improvements implemented on 43 colony worlds. 1 reformed pirate organization successfully integrated into medical support operations. She paused to take a sip of what I'd learned was her 15th cup of coffee that day. "Additionally, we've established ongoing medical supply chains and emergency response protocols for future pathogen outbreaks. Standard procedure for this type of mission." I had to ask the question that had been bothering me since their arrival. "Dr. Hayes, why did you bring military escort for a medical mission? The Hippocratic Oath could have conquered half our systems if you'd wanted to." Dr. Hayes looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "Ambassador, sick people deserve protection. Medical personnel deserve safe working conditions. How else would we ensure uninterrupted healthcare delivery?" Captain Rodriguez joined the conversation, equally matter of fact. "It's basic humanitarian doctrine. Medical missions get full military support because healthcare is a fundamental right. We've found that most people are very cooperative when you explain that you're there to help, but there's always someone who thinks medical supplies make good targets for theft." "But the firepower," I protested. "The Hippocratic Oath could level planets." "Could, yes," Rodriguez agreed. "But that's not what it's for. It's a medical escort vessel designed to ensure that healthcare workers can do their jobs without worrying about security. The weapons are entirely defensive, meant to disable rather than destroy. Though I admit the engineering team did get a bit enthusiastic with the targeting systems." Chief Medical Officer Ironside laughed. "Elena, your idea of defensive measures included precision strikes on weapons systems while medical operations continued in the same star system. That's not defensive, that's showing off." "It was efficient," Rodriguez replied with a slight smile. Dr. Hayes needed uninterrupted surgical time. I provided uninterrupted surgical time. As the human medical convoy prepared to depart, I realized I was witnessing something that redefined my understanding of both medicine and military doctrine. Humans hadn't just responded to our medical emergency, they demonstrated an approach to healthcare that made it a protected, prioritized operation backed by overwhelming force. Their final transmission as they departed was typically matter-of-fact. Medical infrastructure established and operational. Emergency response protocols uploaded to local systems. Former pirate fleet integrated into medical logistics network and operating under Galactic Health Service contracts. If you experience any future medical emergencies, please don't hesitate to contact Terran Medical Response Division. We're always available. As I watched their ships disappear into hyperspace, I made a note in my personal log: humans have somehow made universal healthcare into a military doctrine. They consider medical aid a moral imperative that supersedes minor inconveniences like armed resistance, hostile environments, and pirate attacks. This is both the most reassuring and most terrifying thing I've ever witnessed. The galaxy's approach to medical crises would never be the same. Word was already spreading that humans would respond to medical emergencies with overwhelming competence, unlimited resources, and the absolute refusal to let anything interfere with healthcare delivery. We'd asked Earth for medical aid. They'd sent cures, comfort, and the firm message that healthcare was non-negotiable. Just another Tuesday for humanity, apparently.